welcome. Thank you, Trev, for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you. Always glad to help out with the community and have a talk. I mean, I have so many friends online and in real life. I've been very fortunate to meet some of you, of course, when I've been down to California in the odd time. So, yeah, it's always great to be here. So, yeah, what do you want to know?
Yeah, well, we'll jump into like a little bit about your background, your coast to coast trip,
Hmm.
um, and kind of like where was that starting point of why you wanted to start the forum. So we'll get into all that. But I just wanted to call out, so our club started about 2 years ago. Thanks for repping the club. We started about 2 years ago, and we are actually the only club that has probably been able to pass through being started through Twitter. And I remember when I started the logo back in July of like 2018. I got my long range, and then I started interacting with you a little bit. And long story short, found out how to get access to needed 25 VINs and all that. And then you
Yeah.
just started like retweeting and just like um, interacting with me. And I had no idea because you, again, one of the pillars. You were how I found out more information about the Model 3. And so I was just like, going bananas over the interaction. But, what was it about? It partially speaks maybe to the community, but what was it about us or just, helping us out and start and like kick things off?
Well, I've been a member of the Ontario Owners Club, Tesla Owners Club, for a number of years, actually, and that club, interestingly enough, was actually the very first owners club to be officially recognized by Tesla in California, and got to know the founder quite well, and just kind of worked with him in a lot of different ways. This was like early days, and I've always had an affinity for California. When I found out that you guys were trying to start something and you'd reached out, and you said, "Well, you only need 25 VINs." Man, I can make that happen real quick with just a quick tweet, right? So that's
Seriously.
basically where that's basically where it started. I mean, 25 VINs is pretty easy to gather up, especially on social media, especially in the early days and stuff. So no, I'm more than happy to help out with that. And yeah, the whole Tesla thing just came about, and I think for most of you, it's always been like, okay, you first hear about Tesla, you see what they're doing, it's like, okay, it's this like attainable thing someday. Maybe can't afford the S or the X or whatever the case may be, and try to get into the Model 3. And that's where I kind of came in at the same time. Like I'd found out about Tesla way before it was actually known as Tesla. It was basically back in the days when it was, um, God, what was the darn name of the company? Anyways, they made the T0, right? I saw that in about 2000 or so, Popular
AC
Mechanics. And I thought,
propulsion.
yeah, AC propulsion. Thank you very much. So I'd found out about that, and then really had only found out about Tesla kind of originally when there was a lot of lawsuits that were flinging around between Elon Musk and Martin Eberhard and this whole thing. And I thought, what the heck is going on with these guys? And of course, then they came out of stealth mode with the Roadster, and I thought, oh, this is pretty cool. But I didn't really pay attention until they actually started doing the beta program of the Model S. And I followed that like a hawk, because I was like, when they first saw that picture, back in March, I think it was around 2009 when the picture leaked of the very first Alpha, I said, oh my God, that thing is gorgeous. I got to have one of those someday. So anyways, I paid attention, followed it very closely. When they released when they did the intro of the Model X, I followed that program very closely. But again, these were early days. It's like, six-figure cars, can't afford it. But when Elon started talking about the Model 3 and this was going to be an affordable car, I thought, okay, that's for me. That's what I want. But at the same time, because of my background in computers, I'd been on forums and BBSs since like the late 80s, always been involved with forums. I thought, and participating in setting up forums, I thought, what can I bring to the community? Knowing that I had this gut feeling that the Model 3 was going to be a big deal. So that's when I started the forum. I actually registered a domain name and started building the forum in October of 2015. This is way before the Model 3 was actually announced. And of course, then it was announced. And then what had happened is I actually did a YouTube video literally the day after the Model 3 was announced. Remember when Elon was on stage and they had that 3D revolving CAD drawing? I took that as an opportunity to do a video and just kind of like explain what I saw. And that video went crazy. It just went viral. So right at that point, I think I had a feeling like, well, maybe I can do something with this. I was already on Twitter for a little while, but not really crazy active. So I decided at that point that I was going to use the social media and the YouTube to cross promote this brand that I created, Model 3 Owners Club, right?
Yeah.
However, I painted myself into a corner. That's why I rebranded. But anyways, that's the story for another day. So anyways, I have a lot of background history. That's where the whole thing came about. And because I'd been involved with forums for a long time, I wanted to make sure that the forum was a friendly place, mostly for newcomers. There have been some other places online and stuff, and there's a lot of people that have been on there, and they have different opinions and stuff. But I always wanted a friendly place. Social media can be a pretty nasty place. Most of us have experienced the Tesla Q thing over the last few years. So I tried to keep it very friendly that way. So that's where I just kind of co-marketed everything. It was the YouTube channel, the Twitter account, and of course the forum, and built up the user base. Yeah, and that's where we stand today. It's still growing. We've opened it up to more products now. So we have Roadster, Cybertruck, Model Y. I mean, all the cars. There's all sub discussion forums on there. I have lots of plans for expanding it. We just did a software update recently to add a whole pile of really new features, and people are absolutely loving it. We have some wonderful sponsors too, which really help out. I actually kept the forum free of advertising and sponsorships for like the longest time, but after a while, it's just like the hosting costs just got out of control. So I figured, you know what, I got to start monetizing this thing. So, and it kind of worked out at the same time, because I had decided to start focusing more on this and doing a little bit of early retirement. I kind of consider myself semi-retired now. So this is what I do. It's it's doing the forums, doing the YouTube, and all this outreach as much as I can. I did a lot more outreach before the pandemic hit. Obviously, I would go to every meeting and talk to people and organize meetups and all this other stuff. So that's my story.
Yeah. No, totally. And I think along with that, you talked about, just the early days of Tesla, the Model 3 reveal, and kind of like even the kickstart of your YouTube channel with, the day after, giving kind of the briefings on like what you saw. What was your first Tesla? And walk us through like that decision.
Well, it was quite funny because obviously because of cost, I was on the bandwagon. I mean, as soon as Tesla started talking about we're going to release a cheaper car, that's when I started putting money away. This was probably about a year and a half to 2 years before the Model 3 was even announced. They started talking about this. So I figured, I'll start putting money away with this. But I always had an affinity for the Model X. I liked SUVs. I'd been driving SUVs for 15 years. And I was like, oh, that Model X is so nice. So when they announced the Model 3, and because I'm in Canada, we're about 6 months behind, especially with the Model 3 ramp, because it was quite slow. It was very painful for them. When they started bringing them up here, the car I really wanted was the Performance. I was ready to plunk down the money and buy like fully kitted out everything, but it wasn't available. Meanwhile, I looked at my bank account and I'm like, man, I could buy a Model X now. I can get in and do some videos. So I did a bit of a side street kind of thing. I bought a Model X. I kept that for the better part of 2 years. It was a great car. But after a while, I mean, not today, as of yesterday, but I started feeling a little left out in the tech sector, because the Model 3 was getting all the latest tech and it was getting, the new screen and the faster MCU and all this other stuff. So then when they announced the Performance Model 3, I was like, okay, because I have my finger on the pulse of what's going on with Model 3, early quality problems and stuff, I figured, you know what, I'm going to wait, let the bugs get kind of wrung out and stuff before I bought anything. That's why I didn't buy a Model X right away when I had the opportunity. I just kind of waited a little bit. So anyways, at that point I was looking at things. I figured, you know what, my Model X, which was a 2017, a 75 kilowatt hour battery pack. I really feel for the people that have 60 kilowatt hour battery packs. Let me tell you, in the cold, a Model X is a pig when it is in the winter months. So I was not getting the range, and I ended up doing a lot more road trips than I anticipated. So doing the extra supercharging stops for me in the colder months got old really fast. So at that point I made the decision. So I sold the Model X and I bought fully loaded Model 3 and Performance. And the timing was perfect too, but that's because when they dropped the price and, they went to white as the free color. So anyways, that's when I bought that car. I love that car to death. I just love that thing. However, my next car is going to be a Cybertruck. The Model 3 will be my wife's driver. We don't. We have two cars. We only drive one. That's the Tesla. The other one sits in the garage. So the Model 3, unfortunately, is going to be a garage queen, and the Cybertruck's going to be our daily driver. Mainly because our situation is such that we only have a one-car garage. We live in a townhouse, and we only have one parking spot and one tiny. The Cybertruck and the Model X would not even fit in my garage. So literally the Model 3, and that's it. So it's going to live in there. I don't want to get rid of it. I love that car to death. But really looking forward to some of the newer cars and stuff. I mean, there's times when I think maybe I should sell and get a Model Y, but I'm like, I don't know. The Model 3 made me fall in love with sedans again. That was the great part of that car. So that's where I stand. I bought a Model X, enjoyed it. If I still had the money and I still wanted an SUV again, the Model X as it stands as of yesterday, that's the one to get because it's got all the new toys in it. So.
Yeah, totally. Well, also too, like I think with the forum, right? I think you even mentioned you'll get a lot of wind of like the latest and greatest things that are coming out, kind of getting a whiff of like the things that are coming. What has been kind of unique about the Tesla community, or even potentially like car community within Tesla, that is kind of differentiated between like this community versus like Porsche, Mercedes, Honda? What is those things kind of that stuck out to you?
That's a really good question. Let's see here. I haven't been part of a lot of car clubs over the years, but I have been very involved with forums. I've literally joined every forum for every car that I've ever literally owned over the last 25 years or so. And I've owned a lot of different makes, not a Porsche, but I've had BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen. I mean, you name it, I've practically had the car. I go through a lot of cars. I'm not satisfied for very long, so I tend to switch quite often. But I've always been participating in online communities, and I value forums a lot because of the fact that you can exchange ideas with people. You have a nice organized way of exchanging data. You can search it, unlike, Facebook groups have really come on strong a lot lately, but it's a hot mess. I mean, anybody's ever been in a Facebook group knows that it's absolutely horrible, but people join it because they're already on Facebook and they don't know any better. So it's a tough dichotomy to try to get people to look at both. But the Tesla community is nothing like I've ever experienced in my life. It's so much more family oriented. The people are very, and I probably going to accept some people here, but this is not an apples versus orange type of thing. But you got a lot of people that, and I'm an Apple user myself, and I've been an Apple user for 30 years. The community is very much like that. And I see a lot of similarities between Tesla and Apple. Tesla takes a lot of things out of the Apple playbook and how they do things. So I feel very kin to that type of community, mainly because, you have a fantastic product that sells itself. And, it's better in most ways than anything else that's available on the market. And that enthusiasm for owning the product is something you want to share with other people. So obviously the community is very much like that. They, very much like a family. It's like, oh, you have a Tesla. Which one do you have? The conversation starts. I'm not saying other car brands and other clubs don't have that, but I haven't seen it to this level yet. And I probably Sandy Monroe would probably say the same thing, right? He's a Jeep Wrangler guy, right? So anyways.
Yeah, and I think kind of along those lines, it's been, as you said, one of the best communities that you've been a part of. You've pretty much been a part of every forum for any car you've owned. How has it changed? Like, I think, we're in this new chapter of Tesla, worth more than Facebook. Which is crazy. Worth more than Facebook, worth more than all the car companies combined. And now we kind of have two mass-produced cars, right? The 3 and the Y. How has the community changed specifically on your forum, versus the early days of when you started it? I think I looked at your Twitter handle. You started back in 2016. So take us through that journey, kind of like what you're seeing today versus 2016. I think there's, at least in my opinion, there was kind of like, some biases, especially like, because the early guys were all S and X owners.
Yep.
And then you get this new wave of 3 owners where it's affordable, more people can enter now. So if that helps answer the question, maybe you can speak to that.
I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I'm glad you asked that because I have noticed the change. When I got involved, I mean, it was SNX only, and the people that were involved with that got super deep into the cars, myself included, right? You learned everything. You understood how the batteries worked and all the technology and stuff. And that was directly mirrored into what I was doing with the YouTube channel, which was trying to take all that knowledge that I gathered and put it into bite-sized chunks to try and educate the people that were coming into the Model 3 fold. Because I had a feeling with a mass market car, you're going to have people who want to buy it because of XYZ, but not necessarily because they want to be into the tech. And these are, I mean, they're computers on wheels. So the learning curve is a little higher. And I've definitely noticed a change in the community. You get a lot of first-time buyers, especially today now, that are buying the cars, and they immediately seek out some kind of forum or online venue or whatever, and they ask the same questions over and over and over. Like the number one thing that I see is like, why am I only getting 310 miles when yesterday it was showing 317? Right? Switch it the percentage and forget it. I mean, the usual things like that, right? So it's still an educational process, but it's a flood of it now. At first, it was a lot easier to manage, but now it's getting tougher and tougher to manage because just so many people are getting in. And unfortunately, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, especially Apple or Tesla, I should say, but I don't feel that there's enough education happening at the delivery level, or maybe it's a combination of people spending the time to learn more about it so they have less questions. It's just like, here's the keys and off you go. And then people are left kind of hanging and stuff. Now, I appreciate that because they come to the forum or they come to the user groups and we can do things. I mean, it's a little more difficult now because of the pandemic. But when I was involved much more in person with the Ontario group, that we actually go and do seminars. We either did it at the delivery centers when the Model 3 first originally was being delivered here, or we would do it at clubs, or we do it out in the parking lot, that kind of thing. That's probably the main thing that I kind of miss and stuff. So we're still doing that. I also did a series of tutorial videos, which I thought were better than the Tesla ones originally. Maybe not so much now, but just to help people out. So there's been several efforts on many different fronts to try and alleviate some of that stuff, but it's definitely changed. And I think for the better in a lot of ways because it makes Tesla grow. But from an aspect of trying to educate people, it's a little overwhelming.
Yeah. We could spend the whole call literally on just like that last point.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because like, I mean, that's been at least since, I've become part of the program, and, we started Tesla in Silicon Valley by your help. That's been like, like our second biggest page right now is new Tesla owners for 3 and Y, like orientation, literally like, but now Tesla kind of has transitioned into no PR. They essentially laid that whole team off, and it's kind of the gap of learning is probably going to grow, I would say, because especially when they're trying to hit delivery numbers. I mean, even how their supply chain works, right? The first 2 months is shipping outside of the US. The last month is everything goes in US.
Yeah.
And so at least that's how our club is. But how is that? Do you see even fluctuations within the forum of like when people are joining? Is it seasonal based on like, the end of the quarter or?
Well, I mean, the forum is international. We don't block it on any country. Anybody can kind of join and stuff. I mean, we work really hard to keep the hackers and the spammers out. But everybody, I mean, I would say the preponderance is probably, most of the traffic is probably 80% out of the US. It just seems to be the biggest market. And yeah, I can look at the numbers, and whenever there's a huge announcement, like yesterday, big spike in traffic, it happens. End of quarter, people take deliveries, new cars announced, those kind of things. So anything that you see in the Twitterverse, for example, because that's where I'm very active as far as social media. I basically don't touch Facebook. But on Twitter, I mean, the flurry of things, it's mirrored on the forum too. It's just one of those things. So
yeah, totally. And I know you obviously, so you live in Canada, and you mentioned how the X is just horrible in the winter. And
it's not horrible. It's just a pig on energy. That's all.
Exactly. And I know, you've done a lot in your Model 3, but before we step into your epic trip coast to coast, specifically across Canada, what are some of the big myths that you've kind of like seen specifically with Teslas or EVs in cold weather? And then hopefully that will lead us kind of into your trip that you did coast to coast.
Well, long time. Let's see here. Well, the usual things that we get is like, people who are not educated about EVs, although it's changing. We're like, well, you can't drive anywhere in the winter because, your battery's frozen, or you're like, oh, where am I going to charge? Or the battery's only going to last you a year because my phone only lasts a year. The usual questions that you get about that. So, it's an education process, and the proof is in the pudding. You own one and you drive it and you get used to what it's like in the winter. Yes, the cold affects the range of the car, mainly because when a battery is cold, a lithium ion battery is cold, the chemistry is slow. It just can't deliver the power that you need, and it can't accept the power that you're demanding of it when you go to supercharge. So you're being attacked on both ends, right?
Yeah.
So there are ways of mitigating that. We can get into that a little bit later, but to get back to about your trip, for those of you who don't know, this time last year, typically I take a winter vacation. My wife and I will go down to Florida for a week. We go to Cars and Coffee with the great guys at Evan X type of thing. And then we have a bunch of friends down there. And my friend Ian, who's also on the podcast, who's also on the forum, Mad Hungarian, follow him. He's awesome. Tires and Wheels. You can't find a smarter guy out there. But anyways, he lives in Montreal. And last year he came down on vacation. And we were sitting around on the beach. And Ian was like, we should do a road trip sometime. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, whatever. And then we got back, and Tesla all of a sudden lit up a whole stretch. So for those who don't know, in order to travel coast to coast on the supercharger network in Canada, there was a huge gap. Like it would stop in Ontario, and then you would have this huge gap all the way across the prairies until you got into BC. You'd have to dip down into the US. Montana, that type of thing to get across. But on December 18th, they had flipped the switch and they had lit up about 23 new superchargers overnight. Well, Ian, his brain got working and he called me up and he says, you want to do a road trip across Canada in the winter? And we're going to do it like nonstop. And I'm like, okay. But Ian is smart because he had already done the math, because he used a website called a Better Route Planner. If you guys have not seen this, it's truly amazing. Yes, you can do a route plan in the Tesla UI, but it wants to take the shortest trip possible. So for us to go to Vancouver to go to Halifax, which was the distance we were looking at, 310 miles, 6,100 kilometers. When you type that in, it wants to dip into the US. So we used the Better Route Planner to make sure that it followed the Canadian route, 40 superchargers. And we plugged in a bunch of numbers like, okay, it's going to be minus 10 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in non-science units, but, we're going to have some extra weight. We're going to have winter tires on it. It's going to be cold, yada, yada, yada. And you can punch all those numbers in. And it came back and it said, you can do this in 72 hours. So Ian said, let's try for 72 hours. You want to do it? I'm like, okay. So that was our plan, to start from Vancouver. So there is a supercharger not on Vancouver Island itself in Victoria, because there's a supercharger there. We wanted to do it on the mainland. So the very first supercharger was in Tsawwassen, which is on the very smallest peninsula, almost by the US border down. And then go to the furthest east supercharger, which is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Now they are going to add more, but that's the distance. So anyways, that was our distance. That was our goal. And we decided to do it for three reasons. One of them was to bust the myth that you can't drive long distances in an electric vehicle. I mean, here we are, 3,800 miles, right? Second one, you can't do it in the cold, which is BS. Yes, you can do it in the cold. And three, people's myth is always like, oh, it takes too long to charge, right? You're going to be there for 3 days. So our average charging time was 18 minutes. We had tracked it.
What?
Like 18 minutes.
Jeez.
Now, keep in mind, all of these new superchargers that they had opened were all V3s. They had flipped all the switch, right? So all these V3s. We'll talk about that real quick here in a second. But anyways, so that's what we decided to do. We decided to do it at the end of February. February is the coldest month in Canada. So as we got back from Florida, we headed out to Vancouver. Ian got ill for about a week, so he was delayed. So I had a little mini vacation. Hi, Somi. She helped out. She was wonderful. So anyways, that's what we started. We got in the car. We left at 10 a.m. On the dot. And we had a wonderful time. We took turns driving. The only times we stopped was to charge. We did not stop to take a detour to go to the bathroom or eat or something like that. These are things we did while we were charging. So we would only switch to drive. So Ian would drive, say, 6 to 8 hours, and I would do the other all the way up to Vancouver or to Halifax. So anyways, long story short, we did it in 73 hours and 27 minutes. So almost right on the dot. We could have done it in 72 hours had it not been a couple of cases of human error. A couple of times we charged a little longer than we needed to because there was a couple of superchargers on the map that were showing they might have been out of service. So we decided to skip those. So we had to do an extra long charge. And then one of them, I think I made a mistake where I undercharged. So I had to go a little slower. But definitely had circumstances been a little better. Oh, by the way, we also did it in the least efficient Model 3, a performance car, no less. So if you had a long range rear-wheel drive Model 3, absolutely could have done it in 72 hours. Matter of fact, in the summer months, we know it could be beat, could be probably done in about 68 hours very easily. So fun trip. Unofficial record that nobody's broken yet. So it was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the V3. So did the V3 being lit up, like, as you said, overnight, how did that help or help the trip or make the trip?
Kind of yes and no. We were excited about the V3 situation, and our methodology was actually to take advantage of the V3 supercharging, because if you've experienced V3 supercharging, it charges the fastest when the battery is like really like below 15%. And our goal was to hit every one of the superchargers and not skip any. Literally to get into the supercharger with as low SOC as possible, so we could really take advantage of that fast curve and only stay as long as we needed to get to the next one. Because there's a law of diminishing returns, right? If you stay to charge too long, you're not getting any benefit. So that was our goal, was to hit every single one of them as we went through. I mean, yeah, we had to skip a couple. However, the biggest problems we really encountered was when we hit Northern Ontario. Now, Northern Ontario was fully, I mean, going through Ontario, Canada's a big country. And I'll tell you, going through Vancouver and then all through the prairies was a cakewalk, super easy. I mean, it's flat, other than BC. You put a little bit of cruise control on and off you go. But when you get into Ontario, holy God, it just never ends. It's such a big province. 1/3 of our trip was just getting through Ontario. So the bottom line is, when we got into Northern Ontario, there was these really small towns where they would just throw the superchargers in. And most of the time when we plugged in, we were not getting the power that we were expecting. And we had found out after the fact, having talked to some people, they said, well, in these smaller towns, even though we put V3s in, we couldn't fire them up because we couldn't get the power that we needed. So, and then the other problem we had was sometimes you plug into the first supercharger and it was out of order. We'd had to try a second, sometimes a third one. So unfortunately, in the northern parts of Ontario, it was disappointing. And I'll tell you, we couldn't wait to hit some of the V2s because we knew we would get solid charges out of those. So from that point in Ontario, the rest of it was all V2 chargers. And at that point, it was never a problem. However, and I know we want to move on to other things here, but I will tell you something that happened after the trip. Now, keep in mind, Ian had already been to Florida and back, and then had driven all the way out to Vancouver, and then we driven all the way over to the east coast of Canada. So in total, he did in excess of 100 superchargers on his car. And the day after we ended up in Halifax and we decided to come back home, we got as far as New Brunswick, and the car started pulling power, like big time. And we were panicking. We're like, what the heck happened? I mean, thank God it didn't happen on our trip out east. It was just on the way home. So we didn't know what to do. We were kind of running like, what's going on? Because I mean, it was showing 14% and then it would drop to 10 and 8. And it was like, oh my gosh. So we made it into the supercharger. We limped it in. We literally drove to, I don't know, I think we slowed down to maybe 30 miles per hour just to get into the supercharger, sneak in. So that was a bit hair raising. And so Ian had Kyle Connor from Outer Spec Motoring on his speed dial. So we called Kyle and we said, hey, got any ideas? And he says, your BMS is out of whack. So I'm like, okay, what do we do? He says, well, just give it a full charge, run it all the way down as far as you can, and then repeat. So anyways, even though Ian's car had given a complete bill of health before we did the trip in Calgary, by the time we did our trip, the BMS was out of whack. So anyways, Ian went home. He did 2 full cycles. It's been perfect ever since. So that was the only big problem we encountered on the trip.
Yeah, I think what was really shocking about some of the story you just kind of gave us was the fact that you could have done the trip with warm weather in 68 hours versus the 73.
I'm speculating, but yeah, it would be something.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess I would have assumed it would have been a lot faster. What do you think the difference is in that, and how you could potentially? It's only 4 or 5 hours, right?
Well, like I said, it's remember the goal was 72 hours. We did it in 73 and a half. And most of those, the discrepancy between the actual goal and the rated was mistakes, human mistakes, not the car. The car performed flawlessly. It was never a car problem. So knowing that and then doing it in a more efficient car with less weight and in the warmer temperatures, absolutely. Sure, we could break the 72. Yeah, easily. Anybody can do it.
Yeah. Other than that one problem, I think, what was the feedback? At least I remember watching the video of you guys getting to the end. There was like actually a whole party waiting for you.
Yeah.
Like, what was the feedback from that trip? What do you feel like? You talked about some of the myths you were able to debunk, but even the 68 to 72 hours, 73 hours based on human error, like that's just like so shocking to me. I would have never guessed that because I've only, again, California terms, it's probably sunny 300 days of the year out of 365, if not 330, whatever it is. Yeah. So we never deal with that other than when I'm going to Tahoe, especially in the Silicon Valley. Like when you go up to Lake Tahoe, that's the only time we're dealing with the winter cold. And I have dealt with the taking it to a supercharger where the battery's still cold. But what were the big outcomes of that trip?
We did get some media exposure when we started and when we ended, not so much in the middle. The middle part of the trip was mostly social media. I was actually running an app on my phone called Glimpse, and I was regularly tweeting where we were going, and I would share out the link so people could watch us live. And that was interesting because we got a lot of people watching us. At one point, I think I counted over 1,500 people watching the stream at any given time. So people were watching us going across, lots of encouragement. Ian and I, in most of the populated places, when we stopped at the superchargers, people would come out. We had some press come out and people would give us sandwiches and all kinds of stuff. I mean, we were subsiding on snacks for the most part. No time to eat a proper restaurant. Now that only happened at the end of the trip. So it was wonderful. The community, the people that were waiting, that were helping us out along the way, encouraging us. We had another bout of that when we hit Ottawa, our nation's capital. A bunch of people, friends came out again in Montreal. And then the biggest stop, of course, was at Halifax at the last supercharger stop. Matter of fact, they escorted us down to the water, a whole bunch of cars. So that was really fun to see the community. So that was a lot of fun. But again, it's just one of those things. And I think the most important part came at the end of it. And when my dad called me and he says, son, I've been watching you, and this is something you have to remember for the rest of your life, because this is something you pulled off that nobody else has done yet. So make sure that you save mementos and that type of thing. So I've kind of taken that to heart.
That's
so
awesome. Yeah. Well, so we've kind of been through this journey, right? How you started, really at the beginning, finding out about Tesla even before like the O to the T, the 0 to the T. And then starting a forum. It sounds like that was kind of your bread and butter. And then to this kind of like climax of the trip, like what do you see kind of in the future for Tesla, for the forum? Maybe start with the forum and then for Tesla. Kind of just like walk us through what you think is in store for the next couple of years.
My goal right now is to get more engagement on the forum. I think, and it's kind of funny, I've noticed this phenomenon, especially with the YouTube channel, that I figured, with the pandemic, people working from home, they would have more time to spend on these other things, watching more YouTube videos, maybe spending more time on the forum. But what I've noticed is actually the opposite. And I have a theory around that. in the sense that when people are at the office, they use those kind of things as distractions from what they're doing, right? So on their lunch breaks or the regular breaks, or just the distraction, they're watching YouTube videos and stuff. So I've definitely noticed a decrease in the traffic. The other thing too is, I am fighting a little bit of an uphill battle against, the Facebook groups and stuff, because anybody can start a Facebook group. But it's a hot mess. And I said this early on. I mean, it's absolutely a horrible experience. And that's what I'm trying to get across to new owners. And it doesn't matter what platform you're on. It's just like, if you want a friendly place where people are not going to cut you off and call you every kind of name in the book, like you're going to get on Facebook or social media, come to the forum. It's friendly. There's lots of we have some fantastic moderators. The people are well behaved. We don't tolerate, we don't tolerate insolence, that type of thing. So you can go there. You can sign up. It's totally free. You don't have to pay anything unless you want to upgrade your account to get a little less ads. I mean, I have to monetize it somehow. And we have a search function that actually works. That's really quite nice. So it is really a friendly place. And like I said, I've opened it up so that we can encompass all of the other cars. There's a section for Cybertruck if you're into that. We have a section for Model Y, Roadster, Semi if that's your thing. I mean, we got a whole thing there going on. So the nice thing about the forum is that it can be expanded to handle whatever Tesla throws in our way. We know that there's going to be a $25,000 car coming soon. So, we will certainly be on top of that when the time comes. So that's what we're trying to do these days, is try to get more engagement, get eyeballs off of these other distractions, and then get people back onto a friendly place where they can discuss and you can actually find the information that you're looking for. I mean, I have a post on the forum about all of the upgrades we just did, and it's super easy to find stuff. You can bookmark things. It's amazing. It's stuff you can't even do on Facebook. Anyways, That's my 2 cents.
Well, thanks for the update on the forum. What is your thoughts on the future of Tesla?
Oh my gosh. Well, as of yesterday and hearing the earnings call and seeing the updates to the S and the X finally, I'm finally getting some updates on, the Cybertruck situation and the Roadster situation. Oh man, it's looking really, really good. I am super, super excited. I mean, Cybertruck's going to be my next vehicle. That's what I'm paying my own money for. I'm super excited to find out about that. For those of you who don't know, I've also been quite fortunate to have won a couple of Roadsters through the referral program too. But that's a story for another day. Looks like we got an update from Elon today. Looks like that's going to happen sometime next year, hopefully, if all things go well. So that's exciting too. But I think out of all the vehicles in the immediate future, the Cybertruck is the one that I'm really, really interested in. I can't wait to get my hands on it. So yeah, it's looking really good. Unfortunately, here in Canada, we still don't have solar. It's very hard to get things like power walls. So there are product segments that Tesla offers that we just can't even get here at this point. So yeah, I would have a solar. I mean, I just did my roof, but if solar panels were available from Tesla, I would have done it.
Hey, I'm in the same boat. I have a flat foam roof that they will not put on top of my roof. I've had them out twice, but we'll see. Maybe some stuff in the works that they can. Yeah, I mean, I think you talked about a little bit about what's in the future. The $25,000 car gets me excited as we transition into sustainable energy, and especially given the Chinese market, right? Smaller cars, the Europe market. So that's kind of like, for me, they did 500,000 last year. Once I think they announced this 25,000, that's actually like, I think when we will hopefully see that big transition. As far as like your knowledge, like what has been some of the things that have held like the traditional ICE car owners, from adopting the EVs versus like coming over, right? I mean, I think that's ultimately what we're all fighting for. If you're truly about the Tesla mission, I've partially learned that, right? At least for me, speak honestly, is like the product was so amazing that I didn't care about the Prius thoughts before. It was like, I'm buying this. So kind of, just speak to that.
You have to remember, you have to put it into context. We're all Tesla owners now, but we weren't before, right? We had ICE vehicles just like everybody else. So you got to get past that psychological barrier. So once you get past the psychological barrier, you actually own the car, that becomes your new normal. So I think that's the biggest thing for most people, is to get past the educational and the misinformation, because God forbid, I mean, God knows there's so much misinformation on the internet. So and you know as well as I do that the biggest and the easiest thing to show people, or to get them to really, get their brain out of that lockstep, is taking for a ride. That's all. Butts and seats, man. Put somebody for a ride in the car, and then you'll notice immediately the nature. And I've seen this so many times, right? You can talk all day long outside of the car. Oh, the car does this and the car does that and the car does that. And I'm like, just get in the car. Right? And you go for the drive, and the nature of the questions changes immediately. Immediately. It stops being like, oh, what about this and what about this? It becomes like, how do I get one of these? Right? We've all experienced that. So I think that's the thing. We got to get butts and seats. You can talk all you want, but I really highly encourage, I mean, obviously the pandemic situation is what it is, but if you can, just take people for a ride, show them the car. It's such a different experience, and it doesn't matter what Tesla you own, but the experience is so different from, I mean, we live in a society now where we have modern smartphones in our hands, but the cars are equivalent of flip phones. So, you got to show people, like, this is what's possible now. It happens to be electric, but look how modern this vehicle is. Look how minimalistic it is. I mean, it's not for everybody, but I'll tell you, there's never been a person who hasn't looked at the car and not come away impressed in some way or fashion. So I think that's the main thing I think that Tesla really understands. And it's pretty obvious if you look at the Model S refresh. It's like, man, you got to go really out there to really set your stake in the ground to say, you know what, this is the future. This is what you can aspire to. And, it just makes it, you look at Tesla's design in a lot of ways, and you look at everybody else and it's just like, they just feel like dinosaurs. So I think that's what Tesla really understands, is like, if you really put yourself out there and you're not afraid to try different things, that you are going to grab a certain market segment that people will get attracted to. So that's my personal opinion, is like, okay, like I said, you can talk about tech all day long, but I try to get people in the car. I catch myself doing that all the time, right? You sit there and you talk and you talk and you talk, and it's fun. You got this little script in your head you developed over the last few years. But after a while, it's like, man, you know what? Talk is cheap. Let's go for a ride. I do that all the time.
Yeah, totally.
And the thing about a performance Model 3 is that it makes a pretty damn good impression.